All right, so let's get into some sport. There's quite a lot to talk about. We've already mentioned Dricus, but we'll have to get into that too. Of course, Ben and Beyond the Scoreboard, brought to you by Super Bets. We'll talk a little bit about Super Bets in a while. What have we got to look forward to this weekend?
Well, we'll get to Dricus in a second because obviously that's the big talking point, and it's just so cool how much press and how much info is getting out into the media around that right now. But we need to start with SA20, of course. Now, Durban Super Giants are kind of seen as like one of the major favorites. They had their first loss yesterday, so they are now in second place. The Paarl Royals, though, are the team to beat. They got 3 out of 3. And they're in a really good place where there isn't as much rain as the rest of the world. It's quite dry in the winelands there, so they can get good momentum where other teams might stutter with the weather. So I don't know if that's an unfair advantage, but it's something to kind of look out for. So today we've got the MI Cape Town versus the Paarl Royals. So that's like the Cape Town derby. Those are the two teams there. So that'll be at 5:30. And then tomorrow we've got the Durban Super Giants taking on the Sunrisers Eastern Cape. Now they're also a really good side. They are the defending champs. That'll be at 1:30. And then Joburg Super Kings, who have been horrendous so far. Absolutely horrendous. They've had some rain-altered matches, but they've also just been terrible. They're taking on Pretoria Capitals, who are, they're doing pretty well. They beat Durban Super Giants recently. And then Sunday, we got Paarl Royals versus MI Cape Town. So it's a double-header for those two teams for the weekend because how the format works is that you play each other home and away. So that'll be a great weekend in the Cape to watch cricket. So, like I always say, cricket's an amazing sport to play with on Super Bets because you can play the live stuff. There's various eventualities to kind of bet on and get excited about. And because of T20 crickets, a lot can happen and it makes the viewing incredibly engaging. On the rugby, last week was really good because the Stormers and the Bulls won. Bulls winning away in the Investec Champions Cup was a really big deal. Stormers at home were good. They didn't manage to prevent the other team losing a bonus point, but they were full value for their 31-17 win, I think it was, against Sale. So this weekend they'll be going at it again. This time the Bulls will be at home and they are taking on Bordeaux at 3. So if you are in and around Loftus, it's a good daytime game. And then Stade Francais, who maybe like a really, really great team in the years gone by, not so much anymore. They are hosting the Stormers at 7:30 on Saturday. So if you're not into the cricket, great rugby on Saturday, which then obviously leads to the football. Bit of a rocky start for Bafana at AFCON. They lost their first game 2-0 against Mali. They are now playing again on Sunday. They take on Namibia. And I always find this, like, if you're not a huge out-and-out football fan, African football fan, I always find AFCON quite interesting in that you've got these tiny little countries, like Mauritania plays there. I think we touched on this last week, but like how good can a team come from a country that is just so little resourced? And, South Africa, comparatively speaking, although Bafana is not like a world strength, you would think they would have the squad depth and the facilities and that kind of stuff to do pretty well. Yeah. But it's not. It's an absolute crapshoot on the results front. Again, this is why it's so fun to play with Super Bets on something like this because there's lots of games, there's lots of chances for upsets. So this weekend, there has been some upsets. The bigger teams like Ghana, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, you would back them. Egypt, they would do better over a stage of time. But this weekend, we've got Senegal versus Cameroon, which is a really, really big one. Senegal defending champs, 7 o'clock on Friday. And then Saturday, we've got Tunisia versus Mali. Mali just beat Bafana, of course. And Tunisia, traditionally pretty strong. And then Sunday, we've got Morocco versus the Democratic Republic of Congo at 4. And then SA will take on Namibia at 10 at Sunday night. So, maybe not a huge amount of hype around that tournament because Bafana got off to a bad start, but still lots and lots to watch out for. Just like in the Premier League, Arsenal, who didn't play last week, they are now playing. And as I said last week, they were 1 win from their last 7 at that point. So really need a win. Really desperately, otherwise they will just go back to their old ways of just being that nearly team that everyone sort of abuses. They'll take on Crystal Palace 2:30 Saturday, and then Sunday Bournemouth versus Liverpool. There's FA Cup stuff in the mix at the moment, so that's why there's not so much Premier League. So that's kind of like what the bones of your weekend looks like. Into the UFC 297. So first up, I'm going to tell you that it's not a great card. Normally these cards have 3 or 4 really great fights on the main card, and if you just look at the sort of profiles, going to go with no. But it is Dricus versus Sean Strickland. And there has been, like, I've said it so many different times, the UFC are the masters at promoting their sport. And, everybody wanted to see Dricus versus Adesanya. Then Dricus had a foot injury, so he couldn't fight against Adesanya, where the big beef was. So Strickland, this guy came in, and nobody really gave him a chance. And somehow he managed to win. And good on him.
Yeah.
You know, he's a really good boxer. He's just an awkward guy to fight against. And then suddenly he became the champion, which is kind of inconvenient because he's not a champion kind of guy. Like, he's a very foul-mouthed, rough, just feral, like human in so many different ways. And now there wasn't really beef between Dricus and this guy at all. But what this guy does is he talks crap about everybody. He'll go hard at your wife. He'll go into the fact that you've cried maybe before in a press conference. He's always going at somebody, and no one ever gives it back. And Dricus he gave it back so hard. Like, this guy always talks about how he had a tough childhood, and Dricus is like, I'm going to beat you more than your dad did. And for some reason, he got really upset about that. He even threatened to stab Dricus if he ever brings it up again. And Dricus, being Dricus, is like, bro, I'm far too quick. You'll never be able to stab me. You can do whatever you want. I am going to win this title. So from 5 a.m. on Sunday morning, so it's in Toronto. So 5 a.m. Sunday morning on Supersport, you'll be able to watch the main card. So Dricus will probably be fighting around sort of 6:30. But it's always good to watch a few fights before that to get into the sort of, momentum of it. And yeah, as I said, I put money down super bets for Dricus last year, and I got pretty decent odds, which have shortened drastically to about even money now. Yeah, it's just simple as that. Strickland is really, really impressive. He's one of the best boxers.
So sorry, can I just ask about the strategy of like betting in advance when the odds are better? So you would say for things like this where you're really like, you want to be involved and you feel that something's really exciting and you want to do it well in advance, you will get better odds if you bet way in advance.
Yeah, so a couple of things shorten the odds basically is that, when something comes out, there's few bets on it. So what those odds will be your sort of general odds that are based around certain theories. And then the more, I don't know, a player in a sort of tournament or something comes into form and they start showing promise, then more people bet on them, so the odds will shorten. In Dricus's case, that when the odds get created, it's not like they're fighting or playing, so to speak, before that. So there's no evidence of the form getting better. But then what happens is you get a lot of media hype, and then you get guys like me who talk people up. And then slowly but surely, when people start putting all the bets down, it's like, well, it's not going towards this guy, so now he's shortening. That's kind of how it works. So yeah, I mean, if you're really into an event, like if you want to bet the next Rugby World Cup, you can do that. If you want to bet on the next Ryder Cup, if you want to bet on the Masters coming up, and you've got a good feeling about someone, you'll get obviously the best odds now. And then you're
basically reminding me too that anything in the world can be bet on. There's someone somewhere offering odds on everything.
Well, I'd like to say offering markets, because that's what these things come down to, right? There's a market of interest in someone, and there's a market of interest in an outcome. And that's why it is so fun to play on these kind of things. And that's why I think as a sports fan, it's cool to kind of like get it early on an idea or on a result you think is going to happen. So I don't want to talk Dricus up too much. I think I've never been, as I've said many times, I've never seen someone who knows their sport as well. And I think preparation-wise, they're going to have 2 or 3 extra tricks that the Strickland camp won't have. And to his credit, he's got as far as he's got, Strickland, by just being the one gear kind of guy. He fights a certain way. Whereas with Dricus, because he first had to fight his brothers growing up, he then had to fight in kickboxing, and then he went into the EFC. He's fought a variety of people in a variety of different ways. And a lot of the time, Americans kind of forget this because they just kind of grow up, they do well in amateurs, and they fight UFC. To get into the UFC as a foreign fighter, you've often got to go through quite a few hoops. I mean, Dricus was fighting folks in Eastern Europe who don't get drug tested and who have like massive henna tattoos on their chest for advertising. Like he's done the hard yards this week. So I think if I was to go for a prediction, I would go second round submission win for Dricus, because once he gets a couple of shots in, he's so physically strong, and I would go with a rear naked choke second round submission. That's how he's going to win this fight.
All right. So Carl says, Ben, please don't mess us around. I was going to get up at 5 to watch. I only want to watch the DDP fight. Are you sure about it being at 6:30?
Carl, pretty much. I mean, I watch all these cards, and that's kind of how it works out. So even if you get someone who has a first round knockout, they'll then pad the transmission with like other videos and promotions for other fights. And there's 4 I think three round fights, and then there's a co-main event where there's 2 women fighting for the vacant bantamweight title, I think it is, and that could go 5 rounds. That could be really long, but ultimately look on that sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay, well, Ricky says in the comments too that the main card starts at 5 a.m. There are 4 fights before the Dricus fight. It all depends on how quickly those 4 fights go. So, look,
it's a similar kind of time period.
And if you're such a fan, on Sunday morning, wake up at 5, make yourself some coffee, and chill. You can catch up with your emails. You could sit there and, I don't know, read a book, do whatever you want to do, and then wait for the fight to start. Are you about to go and enjoy a hotel breakfast, Ben? Is that what's going on there?
Not just a hotel breakfast, the Palace breakfast. I'm here because I thought because I've got quite a busy morning, but the Palace breakfast is where again. Time will stop. Sorry, one last thing I kind of didn't point out, because I mean personally, and I say this selfishly, I'm never too interested in tennis Grand Slams until they get to the nitty gritty. But of course, there is the Australian Open right now. So whether you like men's tennis, women's tennis, in the women's, there was quite a few big seeds that have already tumbled out, including our favorite Ons Jabeur, who lost 6-2, 6-love.
Ons Jabeur, I remember her.
Yeah, Ons Jabeur, she's hammered, thrashed. So I think 4 or 5 of the big lady seeds are already out. In the men's, not so many. Generally that's how it works as well. If you're looking to kind of play on the markets with tennis, is that women's tennis is a bit more up and down, a bit more unpredictable. The guys, especially on sort of hardcore tennis, where there's less specialists, like say the French and the clay courts, you get good sort of consistency. So Djokovic is still in on the men's side, and of course Alcaraz will be on the bottom side of that draw. So all goes to well. It could be Alcaraz-Djokovic final if they win their matches.
Awesome stuff. Okay, Ben, lots to think about, lots to get on with, and well done again on your win. And if you want to win, then go along to Super Bets, and you can find out exactly how you could take part in all of that. Super Bets, of course, support responsible gambling, strictly no under 18s. Winners know when to stop. South Africa's Responsible Gambling Foundation's toll-free counseling hotline is 0800 006 008. And we'll check in with Ben again next week